Hello, everybody. Welcome to Serie A Chronicles on quite a week in Serie A. I normally come in to start talking about life and nonsense with Mina Rizuki, but Mina, this has to be one of the most astonishing games of the season that we saw on Friday night. Almost feels like distant memory already, Friday night, because we're recording on Monday, but crikey, did you see that coming? Napoli 5, Juventus 1.
So, I mean, you're going straight to the jugular, no? Like, how are you? No pleasantries.
Yeah. Well, because I feel like if I ask you how you are, you're just going to say I'm sad. So we'd get to the same place. Is there something else you wanted to talk about before we get to...
No, I was going to say that my weekend's probably been as bad as Fazio. Poor Fazio from Salernitana. I really felt for him when I was watching that match. But, yeah, it's been kind of a sad weekend. No, that's not true. Listen, at the end of the day, like, I'm sad, but I feel like I'll get over it. I don't know why I'm not as sad as probably I should be. It was a terrible match. I think what was most annoying to me was the reaction to it. And then I saved a couple of comments because they made me feel a bit better, because I like people who comment under like the stories. But it was one of those matches where you're like, okay, I don't know whether to say, well, no, actually, I do know. Like, this for me wasn't necessarily about Juve being bad, even though they were very, very bad. I just want to say that. But it's also about Napoli being really, really amazing. And if there's any justice in the world, they have to win the Serie A. And most importantly, I think they have to get really far in the Champions League, because you look around right now in the landscape of football, and there's no team that really catches your eye. Certainly no team right now, other than Arsenal, that's playing the kind of stuff that Napoli is.
I was going to say, the best team isn't in the Champions League, Mina, but that's okay. We'll be there next season.
Yeah, you will be, and I'll be terrified, you know? That's assuming we'll be there, but like in general, I just, like, how much does Spalletti deserve this, right?
I there's so many things I want to get into with this game. It's why I'm sorry I skipped the small talk this week and just went straight for it, because there's just so much to say about this game, and there's like subplot upon subplot. I want to talk about the players, I want to talk about the formations, I want to talk about individuals on both sides of it. But you've gone for Spalletti, and I do love the whole setup of this game with Spalletti and Allegri doing this sort of dance at a distance with each other, where, you know, Spalletti came in and played that underdog card to a T. Oh no, I'm not good like he is. He's won leagues. I just have to learn from someone like that. And then Allegri came in with his calling him buffo e divertente, which is like, buffo means funny, but it's sort of like a wacky, zany kind of funny. I translated it in my column as zany. And like, we've talked about this with Spalletti before, Mina, like, and Totti in his book talking about him running naked down corridors. Like, he is a bit of a character. But also, like, it does feel like a bit of a, like, slap in the face kind of comment to say about a fellow match. Like, oh, he's a wacky one. And I loved the energy of that, like, from both of them beforehand, like both playing their parts in this story. And then I loved Spalletti at the end of the game, going for his handshake with that total deadpan face, and just like following Allegri as he's heading to the tunnel. And poor Allegri, like, you just lost 5-1. I'm completely like understanding of like just wanting to get out of there and like not have to be in front of everyone. Compose yourself at the press conferences. I think it's because, Mina, like, because I'm like fundamentally in person quite a polite person. I think actually some of it's like Italian upbringing, like fare la bella figura, like not like making yourself like making a show of yourself. It's like part of like how I grew up, was brought up. I'm always like, I have to be quite confident with people, know people before I feel like I can get sassy with them. And like, I just,
and then it's very sassy.
I love it when someone else is like a bit more sassy and like just puts it out there. And I felt like Luciano was being sassy this week, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, it was. I think, honestly, the whole build-up to this game was really fascinating as well. There were just so many good articles coming out just about, there was one in particular about, like, the way that they've been raised, and, you know, like, all the similarities that they had and who they were coaching on, who they had been coached by. And they were talking about, like, how Allegri was this, like, fantastic midfielder that played in Serie A and managed, like, over 100 appearances. Whereas, like, you know, poor Spalletti never really managed to get far in the way that they were raised. You know, Allegri was allowed to indulge in a little bit of fun, have his freedom, you know, could be wacky. Whereas, you know, where Spalletti, it was a lot more about the work culture, the ethic, you know, discipline, and how that has actually changed when it comes to the way that they play their football, right? Allegri is all about the work ethic, the nothing fancy, nothing interesting about it, right? Not like the childhood that he had. Whereas good old Spalletti, who had been raised in a different manner, actually brings out the fun in his game, you know, the splendor of how beautiful his teams are and how well coached they are. And I thought it was fascinating, you know, and everything that I thought was going to happen didn't really happen, you know. So I kind of like, it was really funny because I was looking at the betting odds for this, and it was just like, so it was like almost like there was just no way any of the betting places thought that Juventus were going to win this. And because the value was so high, if you put like a £10 on Juventus win, you'd win like £500,000. It was like, that was how stretched that they thought this was going to be. But it was different things. It was about how many of these two teams had scored in the last minutes of the game, right? It was all about, like, could this be tight? And then at the end, there'll just be an explosion of goals because these are the two best teams that score at the end of the game. Juventus especially good after 90 minutes. Napoli especially good after 75. All of these things that I thought would happen. And instead it was this destruction on show by Spalletti. And yeah, it's the deadpan. It's him just sort of walking around after they got 2 goals and being like, you know, not a single bit of him was like trying to show any like happiness, you know. And this is the guy
who just had that straight face, but it's that straight face that, like, underneath it you feel like there's like the mischief, like you're like, oh, I see what you're doing, but it might not be. He's just got that sort of, I don't know, he's got that aura.
Do you ever have this thing where sometimes, like, you have a word, but it's in another word? And it's really annoying. Like, when I watch a team, like, totally destroy another team and I really enjoy the loss, like, I'm always thinking Schadenfreude, yeah? And for this, when it's the other way around, like, when it's my team winning and it's like, ha, you thought we were going to lose, it's always like, toma, all of a sudden I'm really Spanish. Like, I don't know why, you know, but I'm thinking in my head, Spalletti's probably like, in your face, you know, like when he was sitting there saying, I never win, you know. And then he came up to me the one time I did, and it was like talking to me about morality. And I was like, come on, Spalletti, you do win, you know, you do win. And this time you made sure you didn't just win. You destroyed, you eviscerated, you completely threw them out of this planet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing with Spalletti, right? Like, he was playing the underdog role, but the fact is he has won. He won the league twice, wasn't it? He got Roma 2 Coppa Italia wins, which, all right, it's not winning the league, which he was at one point got quite close to doing. But it was still at the time the first time they'd won the cup in 15 years, and they haven't won it since. So it's not nothing what he won there as well.
Precisely.
So I think he has that pride within him, but he was swallowing it to play the part this week, and it worked out so well for him. And I enjoyed his talks after the game as well. He was talking about, you know, basically saying he doesn't think that Napoli can play sort of getting stuck in, having a fight, like defending kind of football. They've just got to play this second kind of football. And I think someone is going to punish them for that. And that's the worry for the Champions League, is that they don't defend very well. You can't always play on the front foot. But, I mean, to get into it, like, tactically, there's no question who got their tactics right. And Spalletti didn't really have to do anything clever. He just did what Napoli have been doing all season. It was their first choice 11, more or less. And they played exactly how you would expect them to play. They wanted the ball. They wanted it high up the pitch. They switched flanks very effectively with Politano and Kvaratskhelia. On the other side of it, you had a decision that, to me, defines the first half of the game, certainly, and in a catastrophic way for Juventus. This decision to start Federico Chiesa at right wing back. And the thing is, I can almost conceptually get it if you're going to play it differently to how they played it, because everybody knows that this Napoli team is incredibly dangerous down that left-hand side. Their left, your right. When you've got Kvaratskhelia and then Victor Osimhen going through the middle, that combination is such a big combination for them and has been all season. So if you put Chiesa at right wing back with the intention of, we're going to push so aggressively on that side that Kvaratskhelia doesn't have the opportunity to come forward, he's got to come track back and deal with Chiesa, then I get it. But Juventus didn't do that, and that's not surprising because they never do that. They always
Exactly.
That's all they could do under Allegri. And so what you had was a right wing back who's not good at defending and who just got caught in no man's land all the time, including really badly on the second goal, but also to some extent was part of many people to blame, but part of the blame on the first goal as well. So I think Allegri, do you know what I mean? I'm stealing a comment here from someone, an Italian journalist, and I'm interested to get your take on it. You know, Allegri was always the famous pragmatist. We've talked about it a lot. We've both actually expressed admiration for his pragmatism. This almost feels dogmatic, like this refusal to break out, this refusal to be more adventurous, because frankly, Juventus' best football was when they were going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was having a little bit of a Twitter conversation, and I always like having conversations with people who don't necessarily agree with me because I like to see the other side, you know? And by the end of it, sometimes I actually be like, yeah, actually, you do have a point. Or other times I'll be like even more dogmatic in my point of view, you know? And the question is for somebody who actually is an admirer of Allegri, who I was chatting to, who was really, really annoyed about the way that this game was going and just in general, like how it has been for the 8-game stretch, and saying, you know, Juventus has been awful. We were just waiting for them to be exposed, which is kind of a little bit of what you said after Cremonese, you know? Mm-hmm. And I certainly didn't feel the same way, and I still don't feel the same way in that sense that I don't believe in luck. I don't believe Real Madrid were lucky to win the Champions League. I don't think Juventus were lucky to manage an 8-game streak. I always think you create your luck. Just like I don't believe in being unlucky either when people trying to explain to me that Pep hasn't won, you know, the Champions League with Manchester City, because you can't be unlucky for 6 years in a row. Like, come on, you know? So, like, you know, not with $1 billion.
It always comes back to Pep.
It always comes back to Pep. It really does, you know? But I guess that for me in this match, what was... You're right. They're better when they go on the front foot. So to me, it was playing...
Well, not
Chiesa.
always, but in this game, they definitely were.
Playing Chiesa as a fullback is just mesmeric in its stupidity. Like, it's just, you would, like, it's just, like, as in, I honestly have no idea how you even, like you said, it makes sense if you're a team that's about to go, you know, full throttle ahead and play like Klopp's, you know, rock and roll football and just attack, and then you can just expose their defensive weaknesses, which is a little bit like, you know, at least this is the way that Inter can do when they counter, you know, but you don't have that. And not only that, you don't have a midfield that's functioned very well. And unfortunately, you do have absences that make a difference. I mean, this is what really annoys me, perhaps, in all of this, is not that I think that Allegri didn't do a good job. It was clear because the formation kept changing. He changed it towards the end of the second half, in which he finally does move Chiesa away from that role and puts him sort of at the top on the other side, you know? And you think to yourself, okay, well, you should have probably started with that. And then McKennie's there. McKennie, I personally don't think should have been playing this game. He's not the right guy. And when you think of teams that play really well or who makes the difference, it's always been Fagioli. So I was really shocked that he wasn't started in that. And I don't know whether it's like, oh, he's a kid, he's not going to be able to this. He's the guy that made a difference against Inter. I would have loved to have seen him play this match, frankly speaking. I thought of long and hard about how I would have changed this game. What's interesting as well is that there were 26 tackles from Napoli. I mean, this is a team that play really good football, but 26 tackles, I mean, this is the combative side as well, you know? And it helped that there was a referee there that wanted the game to play, which made it so much more entertaining, so much more brilliant to watch. Obviously, Allegri and his side lost all their basic structures, all their ability to defend, and the midfield capitulated, which means the defense were under so much pressure. So people who want to talk about Bremer not doing a great job, or the fact that he lost this play or that play or whatever it is, at the end of the day, you defend as a unit. So if you decide to, this is why Milan, when people talk about Tomori, for me, the midfield is not acting as a perfect unit. And so what happens is there's too much pressure and there's only so much a man can handle at the back, you know? And I feel like this is why lots of mistakes can happen. But what annoys me is that this goes so far into being, you know, he's he's terrible. This has always been the way. And I don't agree with these types of things. I don't agree with them saying, oh, so you're the absence of Pogba is what makes the difference. No, it's perhaps not Pogba, but absences do make a difference. And when everyone made fun of Allegri at the time, when he said, let's see how Inter and Milan handle absences, Milan is showing us how they do that. There is a loss when you lose Cuadrado, and especially Vlahovic, because a striker was what was needed. A striker who could apply some pressure, who could hold up the ball at the time. Milik was really struggling because he's not a lone guy up front. But despite all of this, and you can say all of how bad they are, and they don't need to be stuck up for, and Juventus were hideous. Napoli is just on another level. I have never seen a team manage this much brilliance in every way, shape, or form. And it culminates in that beauty up front. I mean, Kvaratskhelia is one thing, but for me, Osimhen has to be a top 5 striker in the world. I honestly cannot. Like top 5. Like I put him in the same company as Mbappe, in Haaland, in Lewandowski, in Benzema. You know, I'm not even counting Messi and Ronaldo or what. I actually even probably would prefer him over Lewandowski. That's how much I think he's amazing. Like he is just on another level in terms of intensity, in terms of leadership, not just his technical ability, his tactical intelligence, how much he gives everything there. It's also just his ability to enjoy himself, to want to be there. I think that he should be, you know, we talk about Zlatan and how he changes things for Milan and about how he is the guy. Like Osimhen is the guy for everyone. I think he can inspire a generation with just how much he loves the game and how much he plays it at full throttle.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with Osimhen. I'm obsessed with him. I think he's, you know, you mentioned Lewandowski there, Mina, and like, this is not about like your back catalogue, right? Lewandowski has a back catalogue that very few people ever can live up to, and Osimhen hasn't done that yet, right? Like Osimhen hasn't done that on that sort of concerted level. So we're not talking about someone's like historic record. But if you ask me right now, if I was making a team of players that I could pick, I'm taking Osimhen over Lewandowski, 100%. Like that's not even really a thing that I doubt. I think there's really probably only 2 strikers in the world, number 9s anyway. Let's keep it to number 9s. Okay. There's 2 strikers in the world who I think I feel like I would struggle not to put ahead of him, and that's Erling Haaland and it's Karim Benzema. That's it. Like if I'm picking a team right now that I need to win a game and I can have any number 9 in the world, yeah, I don't know who else I'd pick ahead of that. I'm not taking Harry Kane ahead of him. I think Osimhen's got much more to his game than Harry Kane has right now.
Me too, yeah. And there's room for improvement. You know that. You know,
yeah,
you feel like there's room for improvement.
Exactly. He's as you describe me, like he's like watching like his big kid sometimes playing football. He's so like full of energy and enthusiasm, and that's really, I don't know, uplifting and joyful and fun to watch. But it's not like that's his main asset. His main asset is that he's just technically extraordinary. Like he can do things that are extraordinary. He's got incredible balance. He's got really supreme close control. Like he's got body control, I think, is this really big thing when you get sort of a ganglia striker like that. It's a bit of a cliche to talk about because of good touch for a big man, but it's about body control. It's about how you manipulate your sort of body position to ease a defender out of your way and to create the space to shoot. He does all of that stuff so well. He's got a brilliant shot. He's good in the air, and he's got that instinct, which we saw on that first goal, of attacking that space, looking for the rebound, of being like, okay, this might break, this might not be done. We have to put ourselves in position to look for that chance. That striker's instinct. And, you know, like one of the few criticisms of him, actually, and I think it was barely a criticism really, but one of the few questions, I suppose, about him was that he hadn't scored yet against Milan, Inter or Juventus. Now, he's been injured a lot and he hasn't played that many of these games. So that's why it wasn't that big of a conversation. But yeah, now he's got that duck off his back as well. Duck off his back, monkey off his back. Sorry, just mixing metaphors. But I thought that tied in a bit with Spalletti at the end of the game. One of the other things he said, because he was asked like, oh, did you send a message to the league with this result? And he was like, the only message we sent was to ourselves. Like, this is us sending a message to ourselves that we can go and do this. We can be this team. And he said for ages that he thinks Victor Osimhen is like, has lots more to show us. He's like, what's exciting about him is you're seeing like the tip of the iceberg right now. So if this is another step on that path to get that, that to get rid of that idea of, I don't score against these teams. Brilliant. Because he's wonderful.
It's interesting because, when we were watching Serie A, we always thought that it would be Vlahovic that would end up being the best player in Serie A and as a striker, and not that I think Vlahovic, you could really feel that his absence in this particular type of match because Juventus need a striker right now. But I have never
do they need
been
Vlahovic? That might be a different question.
That's the thing.
Vlahovic? Yeah.
I've never been as blown away by someone's ability as I have been by Victor Osimhen, especially in this match. Mm-hmm. I've never seen anyone who wants it so much. Like, it's just this. Like, I swear to you, if there was a whole rifle squad behind and they had they were shooting guns, he would still be there, like trying to score goals where everyone else would have walked off. It is this. I don't know. There are not enough superlatives to honestly describe just what he is as a player and just how he just turns defenders around and always finds. He moves so quickly. His speed of execution, it's so quick. It's terrific, absolutely terrific. Yeah. But so was Anguissa, so was Lobotka. Again, offered so much space and time. This is what I think is so interesting. Is Inter did so well to cage Napoli's best players. Really sort of neutralize all of their strengths in the way that they defended. And I was really shocked by how almost arrogant Juventus were in the ability that they came in there without a real plan as to how to defend and neutralize the key points of Napoli's game. It was like, we'll handle it. And I was like, how do you propose we're going to handle it with Chiesa? As in, Inter had 5 men around Kvaratskhelia, and you think Chiesa and Danilo is going to do enough of a job for it. It's interesting, how when you have a team that has set a blueprint as to how you can overcome. I'm a little bit shocked at the way that this game was done and the way that it's gone. And I do think that Napoli is the perfect team to expose the weaknesses of Juventus. But I also think that I honestly can't think of a team right now, including Manchester City, that can stop Napoli. I honestly can't.
So to go back to the thing you said before, Mina, I couldn't disagree with you more about luck. I think luck is absolutely a thing and decides games. And I think over time, yes, the better you are, the more lucky you get. I think that's always true. But I think individual moments can change situations for sure. And I think even within this game, you can point to moments and raise the question. Like at 2-1, Rahmani deflects the ball towards his own goal and Alex Merritt pulls off an amazing save. And if it's 2-2 at half time, maybe there is a different game in the second half. Maybe there is a sudden sort of wobble in that confidence and things go differently. Because to be sort of completely fair to Juventus, going forward in the first half, they did bother Napoli. They did. Angel Di Maria's goal was not a bolt completely out of the blue. There was a few opportunities they created. Di Maria's goal was very good, by the way. Because he also hit the woodwork, didn't he?
Yeah, he also hit the woodwork. And then, like you said, Chiesa created that great chance that Maria saved from. Right.
So the first half was not anything like as one side as the second half. The second half, Juventus completely capitulated. And to sort of just name some of the other people, because we rightly, I think, are focused on Osimhen, but, Rahmani's goal is brilliant and not necessarily something you expect from him as centre-back. He took it really well first time. Then you had Kvaratskhelia setting up Osimhen for a second one. So Osimhen 2 goals and assists, Kvaratskhelia 2 assists and a goal. The two of them obviously sensational together. But then even Aljif Elmas comes off the bench and scores a really nice goal cutting in from the flank and firing off his left foot. And to me, this is sort of the ongoing point with Napoli, which we've talked about before, is depth. Like, what makes this team so much better than most of the competition in Serie A is the depth. Like this game was pretty much their strongest 11, like I said, and I think their strongest 11 is exceptional. Mario Rui at left back is having a brilliant season. Di Lorenzo's having a brilliant season. We've already mentioned the midfield, but Zielinski, Anguissa and Lobotka's really keeping things ticking on really well in that midfield.
But we have tested their depth, and what you mean the bench,
But I think we have a bit coming off the bench. So you've got Lozano, who's had some good games already this season. Raspadori has had some really good games already this season. Elmas had a big impact off the bench in this game, obviously scoring a goal. I think that's the most extraordinary part about this team is that perhaps in midfield there's a bit more thinness, but I think in lots of positions they've got really impressive depth.
Yeah, I agree with you, but what I think is I think most importantly is that they haven't needed to rely on them that much. They've needed to rely on them for like minutes here and there. I think certainly when Osimhen was out and they had to rely on a lot more on Simeone and
Raspadori did fill in really well.
Really, they made a huge difference up front. And but in general, like when you think of the kind of fact, like as in Milan are kind of dependent on Giroud being there, right? Like without Giroud, it really is sort of like nothing going on up front, and Leao having to do everything on his own pretty much, you know. And yes, in that sense, I agree with you. But this is what Napoli have had, is that they have been able to rely on their first 11 quite a lot this season, which perhaps hasn't been something that you can say for other teams. And yet what they have done is define their identity so well that you can sort of make changes and they work really well. This is where I come back and say that what I think is so impressive of the 8 wins in a row for Allegri is not the fact that they managed to play beautifully, but the fact that the personnel have changed endlessly and he hasn't been able to seek any consistency. And I agree with you, in the first half, in the way that it started was terrible because it was all Napoli for about 20 minutes, right? It just seemed to be like they were just moving so quickly that it was like trying to stop like an avalanche of snow with like your bare hands, you know. It was just coming left, right and center, and they were just sort of just trying to survive, just trying to breathe, because there was no real defensive plan. But I do think that when they started to apply some pressure, you could see that Napoli wobbled, right? They started to make mistakes, and it's about trying to make the most of those mistakes, which you can't do again without a striker, which you can't do without Chiesa acting in that perfect role because he's shuttling back, trying to be a wing back, you know. So there were some mistakes there, but I do think that there was a great chance for them to equalize. We don't know what would have happened. And this is why I go back to think that I'm not that disturbed by this. I think there are just some teams that are so brilliant and that can expose particular weaknesses within a side, and Juventus have many, many weaknesses. But I still go back to thinking that if there is somewhat more of a consistency, if there are players that do actually come back and can start and not playing at 50%, that something can be built. But we keep saying that. We hope that it will come true. We still don't know if it will. And maybe more should have been achieved with what's been done. But I do sort of feel it's operating differently because, you know, what Napoli have been able to create with that midfield is consistency. And the midfield is what makes the attack work so well and the defense feel so safe. And without a perfect midfield, I think it all goes and falls apart. And I'm sorry, like for me, Juventus just don't have it. And then I watch, you know, like Lecce's Roermond, and I just think, why is nobody going for this guy? Like Milan need this guy, we need this guy, like everyone needs this guy, you know? And I know that he's not like, you know, really fancy name, but I don't know. I think right now that I think there is room to improve. I certainly don't feel like, oh, this makes Juventus terrible. And now everyone's starting to go like, oh my God, you see, we all knew this was going to happen. Why? Because Cremonese should have scored. Yeah, fine. But they still won over Lazio. They still destroyed Inter in the second half. So I still believe that there's room for growth there. And they did this all with a makeshift squad.
I'm going to move us on soon because we have done 25 minutes during this game. Frankly, I could keep talking about this game. I think it was easily the most interesting one of the week and probably the whole season, frankly, so far. So we shouldn't underdo it either. But a couple of sort of thoughts I wanted to, or not just thoughts, some facts as well to bring in. This is Juventus's first 5-1 defeat. I think this is just one of those wonderful pieces of sort of random football trivia, but is amazing. The last time Juventus lost 5-1 in Serie A, Max Allegri was playing against them for Pescara and scored the opening goal for Pescara. So he was involved the last time they lost 5-1. He was involved this time they lost 5-1. And it's an amazing story, actually, that game they lost last time, because that was 30 years ago. It was in 1993. And Pescara were last and Juventus were like fourth, but they just won the UEFA Cup. So they were sort of like, oh, we're done for the season. We're going to qualify for Europe again. Feet up. And Pescara walloped them. And then Boniperti fined Juventus players, each of them 25 million lira, which was about £11,000 equivalent to. So a lot of money in 1993 for what wages were, as a punishment basically for not taking the game seriously enough. So the last time they lost 5-1 was a big deal. Although, interestingly, the last time Napoli beat them 5-1 was not long before that. It was in 1990 in the Super Cup. And that was very much the last throes of the Diego Maradona era. I know a lot of people are sort of talking about this sort of, I guess, slightly romantic idea that Maradona's having his moment up in heaven with Argentina
Napoli
winning the World Cup, and now Napoli on top. I'm not a big believer in heaven and hell personally. I did grow up Catholic, so I grew up with all that, but it's not my beliefs. But I think it's a very sort of poetic moment from the point of view of Maradona and that history. And look, we're 18 games into the season, and that's a lot of time for things to change. And I don't exclude that it's possible someone else could win this league yet, but I think it's reasonable to say at this point, because we're halfway through the season, for me, Mina, like this idea that Napoli will just mess up because they have in the past, it's not based in reality, because that idea, even if you go back to like 5 years ago when they fluffed their lines against Juventus and everyone talks about it because, they were setting off fireworks. That season, when they beat Juventus in Turin, they were still behind Juventus.
Yes.
They weren't actually in front.
Yes.
And that's just not, and that Juventus team finished on 95 points. So as a starting point, I'm going to say very confidently right now, I don't think any other team in Serie A is going to get to 95 points. So you've already got, I don't think the competition is going to be at that level, which is important to say. And secondly, they are 9 points clear right now. And I think, yes, things can change. Yes, I'm not sort of saying this means they've won the league and it's over, but you can at least say they absolutely have been the best team in the league so far, can't you?
Yeah, they're the most, I mean, if you compare sort of, the level of points between this year and last year, Milan are roughly where they are. The 1 point less this season than they were last. And they were brilliant. And so were Inter, which again, not that much of a difference. The two that have greatly improved are actually Napoli and Juventus. Juventus have 6 points more. I think Napoli have more than that. And it's just been, it's not perhaps their personality of different seasons. There was always a very clear weakness with Napoli, which is the fact that they did suffer under physicality, and that they did, if you kept applying lots of pressure on them, they sort of wilted in the face of any type of superiority. They didn't necessarily show this desire to come back into it, to really show their brilliance. But what it is right now is that they've perfected their plan A. I'm still not obviously entirely sure, like you said, like if they can't play this way and they do have to make it dirty, do they succeed? Maybe, maybe not. But I don't think we'll need to find out this season, because their plan A is that perfect, which is very hard to do. It's kind of sort of, the holy grail in football, to have a plan A that works so well that you never need a plan B, right? They're not a side that's opportunistic in its nature. And you do see that there is still that weakness within them if you apply a lot of pressure, but they know how to keep coming back, because I think what they do have now are players who don't feel any pressure, but genuinely enjoy playing their football, which I can't say is true of last season. Basically, what I'm trying to say to you is that Insigne is gone, they can win, right? I'm joking.
We've had a half an hour conversation all building up to it's Insigne's fault.
But they're just good leaders. I mean, Napoli are great leaders, and there are other teams that are good at chasing. And if Napoli's at the top and have built themselves this, it's because they've deserved it. I wonder what would happen if there is somebody who's coming for them at their throat. But even this season, with the players that they have at their disposal, it's just too good for there to be any other desire to say it's psychological. They're just too good. Their plan A is just too good.
Absolutely. So, I had a final thing I was going to say. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think this sort of idea of where it all leads is so hard to tell. I think unfortunate realities of modern football are, by the end of the season, sorry, they're going to have some big bids from big clubs for Kvaratskhelia and Osimhen, and we'll see where that all goes.
I just say also for their sporting director, I think everyone's going to want him. And Giuntoli is just nothing short. 9 goals and 9 assists for Kvara that he's been watching for so many years, and I mean, Osimhen is just so brilliant. And Anguissa has been such a perfect player. Lobotka, perfect.
And that was the thing I was going to say. Kvaratskhelia, a little bit more than 10 million euros. Osimhen was a big signing, was about 60 million euros, I think, in actual money that I spent on him. But the team has been bought so much on the cheap, and wages about half of what Juventus are. It's an extraordinary project. So, yeah, I can't say enough good things about Napoli, but we do have to talk about some other games, Mina, otherwise this will just be the Napoli podcast. I think the obvious place to go next is Lecce Milan. I heard some people sort of making the suggestion that this was almost like when Napoli saw Juventus beat Inter back in 2018 and then immediately lost to Fiorentina, because it was like the psychological impact of it was like, oh God. And people suggesting that maybe like seeing Napoli thump Juventus like this on Friday night just got into Milan's heads a bit and was like, oh, there's no point, we're never going to catch them anyway. But they did start really slowly in this game. They were 2-0 down after 23 minutes. And frankly, they could have been more than 2-0 down. There was a chance between those two that I can't remember who it was who missed it now, but there was a really good chance for Lecce at 1-0. They did come back to draw 2-2, but I don't know, Mina, what do you think? Just heads not in the right place, or just not good enough?
Do you remember? So Nicky and I do a show on Sky about transfers, and we talk about players sometimes. We don't only talk about the transfer market. We were discussing Lukaku. And one of the things we discussed about Lukaku, I know this is not, is that if he's injured, can he rely on some of his other sort of technical skills to overcome what he's missing on a physical level, you know, like a speed or something that you may incur with an injury. And we were talking about Chiesa, like in the sense that even at 50%, Chiesa can make the difference because he can rely on a perfect touch or perfect execution or whatever it is. And I think that's Milan, down to a T. You know, like Milan needs to be perfect in order for them to, because much like what you have said a lot of the time is that they're exceeding expectations with the team that they have. They go above and beyond to get the points that they have. This is a very, very well-trained team and that know their roles, but unfortunately they do need to be at 100% to keep pedaling through, because they don't necessarily have the quality of other sides that they're competing. And yes, you can say, well, it's Lecce, but actually Lecce have given a good match to pretty much everyone. They got points off Napoli. They were very good against Inter. Yes, okay, Juventus defeated them, but they were good against Atalanta. They won, I believe, that match. I was trying to think how often I've watched Lecce, and they are just the side that, especially on their wingers, they're tremendous. And I think they're just the kind of side that you don't want to face when you've just played 3 games in 1 week. And I think that poor Milan, they did have to go through sort of this mental breakdown after what happened against Roma, where they were 2-0 up and cruising to then concede 2 goals. Then they lose in the Coppa Italia against Torino. And it is exhaustion for a team that I think is quite thin. We've obviously seen that the market hasn't brought about the kind of gems that they were looking for from Ketelare or Origi. They are missing Mike Mannion. I know people hate injuries being a cause, but it is just that. This team is weaker than it was last season because it is missing Frank Kessie, and because the players brought in haven't been able to make the difference. And when your midfield is overworked and you're now even without Tonali in this match, it is difficult, because then you do start seeing the weaknesses of players like Theo Hernandez. When the midfield isn't overcompensating, there's too much pressure on Tomori, there isn't Mike Maignan behind him, and it just sort of starts to get away from them. I still think they're a very good team. I just think they've been badly hit and they don't know how to recover.
It's so interesting, Mina. I hadn't mentioned this yet. Like I roped you in, didn't I, to give your votes for the Guardian's top
Yes.
100 players of the year. And I've now seen the positions of all the Serie A players. I don't have the full list, but I know all the Serie A players because I have to write some words to go with the eventual thing that goes out. And I can't tell you, I certainly can't tell listeners, but it's really interesting, like talking about some of these players and thinking like, oh, I know where that person is. And I wonder what everyone's going to think when they see it. I've given you a clue there that there might be some Milan players in the list. I'm not telling you, Mina.
Oh, come on. Come on.
Just teasing you with it. Do you know this game? It was such a strange game, wasn't it? Because, you know, actually Milan did get their equaliser in like the 70th minute. It felt like there was lots of time. They actually could still have gone on and won it, and they didn't. And in fact, they nearly lost it again at 2-2. I basically agree with you, and I think, but that's also sort of the point, I think, is that the same as I say that I think that Napoli have such great depth, I just don't think Milan do.
No.
And I think that's in the end going to mean the reason they can't win the league this season is they just don't have much depth in this team. And as you were saying, like we do this Sky Sports transfer segment every week during the window, and it really feels like with the Serie A teams this particular window, there's just not a lot to say because none of them can spend. Juventus can't spend because they're going through their board upheaval. Inter can't spend because of the situation with Sunning, and Milan can't spend either because there's just not the money there at the moment. And so they're not going to buy anyone this January, and they probably need
Really
to try and push on and win the league. And so I think that's one of the big reasons I'm sceptical that anyone will challenge Napoli. I just don't see who's going to do it. Milan are the closest still right now. They're 9 points behind, but those 9 points feel ever more like a gulf. I did want to sort of highlight, I don't know if you saw, I really enjoyed Federico Baschirotto's celebration at 2-0 because it looked like one of those players. You're like, you have been a lower league footballer your entire career. He has. I think he's only played one season in the second tier before coming up with them last season. And like scoring against Milan for you is like, it's like genuinely a surprise even to you a little bit. Like it's sort of the way you celebrate it is like, oh, I've just scored against Milan. And I really enjoyed that moment in this game on like a personal level. Like I thought, good for you. Like you're having this career moment. He's not that old. I think he's mid-20s. Maybe he'll end up playing at this level for ages. But he's 26. But you know, he's been a centre back for a lot of his career, and he's played in Serie A and Serie D, so he's not a goal scorer anyway. But yeah, I was very happy for him with that moment he had. I don't know if you want to say anything about Hjulmand as well.
Yeah, I think that listen, it's not that I think that he's void of making any mistakes. It's not like I think this guy's going to come in and he's just so perfect. I think he's a hard worker. I think he reads the game really well. And I think that he knows how to sort of do a little bit of everything, which is exactly what I think that Milan needs and what Juventus need, for example, is two teams that I think missing another midfielder that makes a bit of a difference. And I can imagine him to be a low-cost option. I think he makes Lecce work so well. But to me, there is one thing that I will criticize Milan for, which I struggle to criticize a team that I think that if they did have, like, you know, Tomori and Cagliere with Magnan at the back, you know, their two full-backs, and if you consider they have Zlatan and Giroud always playing, I do think this is a team that would be doing a lot better, you know? So I do sort of definitely want to emphasize that. But what still annoys me about them is, firstly, it's still this dead ball situation. Like you have to figure this out. You know, this can't be the way that you concede goals. You have to find sort of basics. Like we've discussed that Roma can't score from open play very well, although they have shown that they can in this match. But it is also just trying to figure out ways of getting the points when it becomes hard, when you don't have the team to perform. Just your basic structures that can get something for you. Improve on your set pieces. Improve on the basics. I don't know how to say it in any other way. And that sort of a little bit annoys me because they're all about the freedom of the way that they play. And it's kind of always off the cuff, kamikaze. And it leaves you open because there isn't something for you to go back to if you're struggling, if you can't manage it, you know. Just keep it simple. Do the things that you need to do. Defend really well from set pieces. Learn how to learn to do better on that. Discover one move that, you know, you can, I don't know, like just one move that you can rely on a little bit more. And I just don't think they necessarily have that. So if they're not playing very well and with so much energy, you see them sort of crumble a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting down the bottom half of the table, getting into the second half of the season. At the moment, it does still feel like the teams that are in that bottom three are quite adrift. Cremonese on 7 points, Sampdoria on 9 points, Verona on 9 points, and 17th place is Sassuolo, who are plummeting right now, but they are still a good 7 points above Verona on 16. So Lecce for now look reasonably comfortable in mid-table, which they would have bitten your hand off for at the start of the season, I think, to be safe in the middle of the table. So having a pretty solid season overall. I think we should go, there's two places to go next. Let's go to Roma Fiorentina, Mina. That was the big Sunday night game. Slightly sort of ruined as a spectacle, I think, by the sending off of Dodo. I thought the first 20 minutes of this game, it looked like it could be a really interesting, close game. And indeed, it sort of stayed that way, I suppose, until nearly half time. I think Fiorentina didn't just relinquish the fight. And I have to say, since the World Cup, maybe I'm just paying more attention, but I do think that Amrabat has brought back the good energy that he had at the World Cup for Fiorentina. I think he's playing well. But in the end, they could not keep up with Roma, and in particular, Mina, they could not keep up with one of your favourites, Paulo Dybala. How does it feel talking about Juventus needing someone up front and watching Paulo Dybala doing that for Roma?
7 goals in 11 games he scored as a starter, right? How there was something written about their 10th victory, 8 they've obtained with him on the pitch. Um, He's the difference maker.
He's pretty good.
He's pretty good for them, I have to say. Like, but he's always been pretty good. It's about finding his way within a team. And I think right now his partnership with Tammy Abraham is working well. 2 assists from Tammy. It's really weird. This is sort of like a mini Inter versus Juve in the sense that Roma is Juve and Fiorentina is Inter, you know. But obviously with a red card, that would never happen under Inzaghi. But it is kind of this, it was well set up, really tactically well read and by Vincenzo Italiano, who constantly wanted to just get back up there. And a Roma side that really didn't offer much, but had a solid defense and took their chances when they could. You know, it's a mini Juve side. And this is why I say to you, it's not about luck or bad luck or whatever it is. It's about sort of getting the basics right, and then you give yourself a chance for the win. But you're never going to entertain anyone. And you could hear the fact that, you know, not even the Roma fans were entertained. This is dullness on top of dullness, as we expect from Roma, as we expect from Juve. As, you know, they are very alike in that way. But luckily, they do have a player like Dybala who can make the absolute difference. But for Fiorentina, I mean, God, Iconé and Jovic were just so like, it's so bizarre, like in the way that they're sort of their forwards, they just, that's what they're missing. They're missing, you know, they have this brilliant midfielder in Amrabat, you know, they make a lot of mistakes, and that's the problem, that you've got Bonaventura, you know, they make mistakes, and that's where their basics aren't secure and their defense isn't secure. So they're always going to be, you know, struggling with that. But yes, of course, Dodo changed the game around.
Yeah, and it was so early as well. I think that one of the things that doesn't always get sort of highlighted when it is sending off like that, it's not just like playing on 10 men. It's how long you play on 10 men for, because the longer you're on 10 men, the more tired everybody gets. But, you know, Mina, we were talking about luck earlier in the show, and you were saying you don't really believe in it. And I have to say, I think maybe Roma have been slightly this season unlucky. Certainly when you look at the expected goals, they are one of the teams that has not hit the heights it would expect to, both the goals scored and goals conceded. They've sort of underperformed their expected goals in both directions, which some of it is not just luck. Some of it comes down to specifics. I'm certain some of it comes down to Paulo Dybala being injured, because
he is otherwise.
It's always the problem with him. Like, if he's not on the pitch, he can't do this stuff. But Tammy Abraham's been out of form, and I guess the big hope for them now is Dybala being there brings the best out of Tammy again. It certainly did in this game. Interesting questions about Zaniolo and exactly what his future is going to look like. Obviously not called up this weekend, and some sort of contradicting reports about whether he is sick or not and exactly what the reasons are behind that. But are they better without Zaniolo? I think it's not an outrageous question to ask when you've got Pellegrini and Abraham and Dybala all together like that. I don't know if you have an opinion. You don't have to.
It's just that I think that Zaniolo needs sort of a kind of coach that will offer a lot of time to talk to him. You know, he needs to be well trained, and he needs time dedicated to him. The only coach that I know that really does that a lot is probably Stefano Pioli, right? Like, he's a guy that really sort of like gives everything to each player and every player and speaks to them on a constant level. I don't know whether Mourinho, who's trying to like tread water, like, he has a lot on his plate, that he can dedicate all this time to trying to get Zaniolo to do the things that he wants to do. I do think he's a great player, but I think that he's still really raw, and he's not sort of learning that much from the problems or the mistakes that he's making. So this is what worries me about him, because I'm not sure that he will. We know that he has this great room for growth, but I don't know how he's getting older, and he's not sort of learning how to change that. So this is what worries me about them. But in general as well with Roma, when you were talking about them being unlucky or not, I do think this is where, like, good coaches and stuff, you have to do better with Belotti. You have to have included Shmurodov. It's kind of like Tammy Abraham is having this problem, and you've kind of just put your whole attack on, is Dybala there? And then he can make that moment shine. But even though all these other guys that I've got, what comes from them? You know, like, you've alienated Shmurodov. Belotti has just become, like, I don't know what he's become, you know? So this for me is a little bit of a thing that, like, their attack is kind of Dybala dependent, and Zaniolo doesn't have this ability to. I still think he's the difference maker sometimes when he runs, and he's just so stunning on the ball. but it's execution. It's working with the others. It's head up a little bit more, you know. And I don't know if he just needs a lot more time to sort of just grasp these basics. What do you think, actually?
Interesting. I think it's a bigger topic than I really want to sort of go like, deep into right now. But there's something about Zaniolo that I have struggled with for a while, and I can't quite put my finger on it. I don't believe in him.
Did you struggle with Chiesa in the beginning as well with that or not?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think Chiesa, but in a different way. Okay. I think with Chiesa, I never doubted like his sort of approach and work ethic.
But you do with Zaniolo.
I wasn't sure if Chiesa's talent was as great as people were making out, and then he did some things that made me think maybe it is. With Zaniolo, I think the talent is there, but I'm not sure the application is there.
Yeah, that's what worries us.
And I think that's the bit that's hard to pin down. But Atalanta Salernitana, Mina, extraordinary stuff from Atalanta, 8-2. It was pointed out to me that Mimo Ochoa in goal for Salernitana, of course, Ocho is 8 in Spanish. But also he used to wear the number 8, so an ill-fated figure in goal for Salernitana, who also fired their manager Davide Nicola afterwards, which not for the first time in this show I'll steal someone else's gag, but I saw someone on Twitter saying this. I'm sorry, I don't always remember when I see things who said them. I should write them down. But firing Davide Nicola now, a smart move that will allow them to bring in relegation saving expert Davide Nicola later in the season. For now, we don't know who's going to be the interim figure who ends up filling those shoes until he comes back in March or whenever they need him. But Atalanta, Mina, incredible stuff. And I think, was it 7 different goal scorers as well? Just such an Atalanta performance.
Isn't it? 15 overall this season, with a team that I looked at and thought, on paper, it's just nowhere near where it needs to be, right? You know, especially when you consider what they used to have with like the likes of Papu Gomez, you know, Zapata at his very best. And now you look at the side and I don't know whether it's Atalanta being good, really, really good, or Salernitana being really, really bad, you know, like as in when you sort of judge like Napoli, Napoli is just fantastic, but with Atalanta side, I mean, like, I really felt for Fazio. I just felt like he was in this kind of match that was like everyone is just running around him, and he's like having this moment where he's just sort of like, "What's going on?" You know. Obviously, absences in the back for Salernitana in general. This is a team that usually performs kind of well against the big teams. You know, they know how to make people suffer, but this Atalanta side, when it moves and when it finds its focus points, and you've got Lookman at the level that he's at right now, and even Boga getting in the action, like, you know, penalties. But I think sacking Davide Nicola is, for me, like, such a bad move. Really is such a bad move. I know I'm a particular fan of his. I do think that he's a great coach. And this is why, and this is such an unpopular opinion, and I know, and I understand, and I even agree if you want to hate me for it, you know. But I still think, like, scoring 8 just puts people in really terrible situations, you know, like, just, you've won, it's over, you know, it's head-to-head anyway in general, the way that we just mercy, show mercy sometimes.
I don't know. I don't know if that's, I don't think I agree. I think it's not your responsibility as a team scoring the goals. I think you get to enjoy it yourself.
I agree. I just feel bad.
Well, listen, like I said, Mina, it's just all set up nicely for them to hire him back. Maybe they'll just leave it a week and then hire him back, and they can just be like, hey, here's our relegation expert. Yeah. Because they haven't named a replacement yet as of time recording. By the time people listen, they might have done.
They're not great.
Di Francesco is one of the big names being named, which doesn't excite me. Eusebio Di Francesco, who did, of course, take Roma to a Champions League semi-final, but I'm not sure elsewhere in his career has impressed me enough. He did obviously do well at Sassuolo before that, but I think subsequent Sassuolo performances suggested that might have been not just about him.
Roma low-key have had some brilliant coaches, by the way. Like, they have gone on, like, people always sort of dismiss them, but he was great, you know, like, and I always talk about Paulo Fonseca. They all played really good football, you know, when they were at Roma.
Well, what's interesting as well is how many Roma players like spoke super highly of Luis Enrique, who didn't actually do very well there in terms of results, and then, you know, he went on obviously to achieve other things.
Even the French coach who's now in charge of Ronaldo, I forgot his name. Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot his name.
Rudy Garcia.
Rudy Garcia. Like even he at Roma,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought was like they've always had like a pretty nice stack of coaches that are, that I've always been like, oh, they're really good.
I got the first interview with Rudy Garcia after joining Roma, and it was only because they promised me De Rossi, and then like the day before, De Rossi decided he wasn't going to do it, and they were like, "Oh, I got to do something to make it up to you."
Oh, that's so
So they gave me Rudy
nice.
Garcia. It's a shame though, because I never got to
Cute.
speak to De Rossi. I've still never had a sit down with him. I don't think he decided not to do it because it was me. I think De Rossi just doesn't give many interviews, and he'd obviously been like had his arm twisted to do one, then just decided he wasn't going to do it after all.
Yeah, he is that kind of guy.
But
isn't he?
I think him and Totti are both quite particular about interviews, so it wasn't a huge shock in some ways. There's been a few managerial changes this season. We probably haven't talked about all of them enough. Obviously, Mihailovic was replaced by Motta at Bologna. That's worked out reasonably well for Bologna so far.
Great win
came
for
in
them.
to stop at Monza. He's doing really well. Stankovic replaced Gianpaolo at Sampdoria. I mean, he is doing better than Gianpaolo, but that's, I think
That's normal.
Yeah, like
That's a
it's a
given.
very low bar to clear. I was trying to think of a funny analogy for it, but yeah, very low bar to clear. Zaffaroni and Cioffi at Verona is probably the only one that hasn't made progress in terms of better results. So sometimes changing things can shake things up. We'll see with Salernitana.
Oh, Cremonese
but,
have Ballardini.
Yeah, absolutely. Good win for Monza away to Cremonese this weekend, which you just mentioned. To say one more thing quickly on Atalanta, I just wanted to mention, two things quickly. Actually, first of all, just Ademola Lookman again. He's got 9 goals this season. Really having like a shockingly consistent, without being spectacular, shockingly consistent goal scoring season. And the other one is just this kid, Rasmus Højlund, 19 years old from Denmark. Brilliant performance, and just classic Atalanta to just out of nowhere produce another teenager and be like, look at this guy, he's brilliant. Because that is the other weird thing to say actually about this game, Mina. Like, we think of Atalanta scoring all these goals and that's just what they do. Actually, before this game, they'd scored 26 goals in 17 games. It's not nothing, but they were nowhere near the top scorers in Serie A. And then just out of nowhere, they just scored 8. Just Atalanta things, I suppose. Gasperini.
Someone texted me
up.
saying, were Zapata and Luis Muriel holding them back? It's just, it's amazing to me that Gasperini at one stage was being talked about as a coach that could potentially lose his job at the way that Atalanta were performing last season. I mean, he is really one of those guys that makes lemonade with anything. You could throw brick walls at him and he'll make lemonade. Like, he's just brilliant the way that he just gets these players to improve and play. And although the annoying thing about it is Koopmeiners is out is against Juventus. That's a kind of a big loss. Obviously great for me, great, not so great for Atalanta.
Yeah, and that's the thing for Juventus, isn't it? You can get thumped 5-1 by Napoli, but it's still only 3 points that you miss out on. So if they can rebound with a win next game, that top 4 push, which will of course be the priority before the competing for the title, will be still going pretty healthily. The race for top 4 is super, super interesting right now, by the way, because it's 4 points between Milan in second and Roma in joint 6th, I suppose, 7th with Atalanta. So it's going to get really, really spicy. Lazio to round out that part of the picture, 1-2-0 away to Sassuolo. And
Sassuolo have just fallen apart.
Oh, they really have, yeah. I wonder how much longer Dionisi will hold on, because they really are plummeting at the moment, and quite a bad atmosphere with the fans as well, who seem really unimpressed with the project and the lack of investment in the playing squad. So Sassuolo really are struggling. Sarri after that game saying, I don't know why you lot keep talking about the Champions League. Like, the years before I got here, basically the rare occasion that Lazio finished 4th was a great delight, and they sort of average between there and 8th. So stop acting like it's expected of me, which is a typically Sarri response to something, getting a little bit sort of annoyed at expectations. Yeah, he is really. He is, actually.
Can they keep Milinkovic-Savic is the question.
Yeah,
because
I
now
think they
he's
will
starting
until the end of the season.
You think, because he's now starting to get not sure about signing a contract, sort of starting to go against. It just depends on who the interested parties are. Arsenal is one of them.
It's true. Now that Mudrik's gone off to Chelsea, I'd love to see him at Arsenal. He's brilliant.
Nope,
but
I wouldn't.
But yeah, there'll be some interesting transfer talk coming this summer if these contracts don't get signed. There's a lot of Serie A contracts that aren't being signed at the moment. Obviously, Skriniar, I expect to leave and go to PSG. But Milinkovic-Savic will have 1 year left at the end of the season, so he won't stay, I wouldn't have thought, beyond the end of the season, because Lotito won't want him to go for nothing. Leao still hasn't signed his new deal at Milan.
But Benacer did. Good things.
He did. There's others I can't think of off the top of my head, but there's a lot of contracts that aren't being extended yet in Serie A, which will be interesting to follow as we carry on. But we've been going for an hour, Mina, and I think I should wrap things up unless there's something else that you think we haven't talked about.
No, I think we've talked about everything. I can't think of anything else.
I'm sorry.
There is a Supercoppa. There is a Supercoppa coming up.
Oh, God, yes. Supercoppa on Wednesday night. Yeah.
Just a quick prediction.
Voice note after that, definitely. I think Inter are healthier right now in terms of how things are going. Milan just feel like they're short of energy to me.
I agree.
I can't put my finger on it. I know Inter obviously also did blow some points just last week, but still I feel like they're a team that's moving in a better direction. So I'll say 1-0 to Inter. There's a prediction. You?
2-1, just because they don't know how to keep it back. Oh, actually, they did manage it this time around, a clean sheet. You're right. I mean, also Inzaghi, he loves these competitions. He's brilliant at them. You know, it's like his one thing that he does. Like, no, that's not true. He does a lot of things really well. But he is particularly good in knockout fixtures. So probably better than most. So I think it's an Inter win as well. I just don't know whether it's a 2-1 or 1-0. You know,
5-4.
Giroud, is Giroud playing, Lukaku might be there. Ugh. Then it's an Inter loss. No, I'm joking.
I mean, I know it's not new to do them abroad. They've been doing it for years. I understand it's all about the money in the end, but it does seem bonkers to me to be doing a midweek trip to Riyadh and then back at the weekend for more Serie A games.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting because what you have is that you've just had the Spanish Cup, right? And that's been played, and Ronaldo's had lots of company, and now he has more company from Italy, it's just constant entertainment right now with players just going and, whether it's Serie A, whether it's La Liga. Saudi's really invested, haven't they?
Constant entertainment or constant reminders of, oh, you don't play in Europe.
Yeah, that is indeed true. It would be interesting to see if he does visit either team,
Yeah. Let's do some quick shout outs, Mina. Thank you to everyone who supports this show. Really, really appreciate it. As always, we have had some new followers recently, so welcome aboard. Hope you're enjoying the content. If there's things you'd like to hear more of from us, let us know. But yes, so thank you this week to Scott, and Brian, also just Brian, and to Alex Kakafikas.
Oh, nice. We also have Rory Poag, I think, Faris Deliak, and Harry Smith. Thank you so much for joining and being Patreon members. We hope you enjoy our content. I think that is indeed all we have time for. We have nattered on for ages, so do join us. They will be I'm like, no, don't worry about it, even though it's me who's also doing it. Yeah. But we do hope you enjoy it, and we'll be back with voice notes to keep you updated on what's happening midweek. Find us on Twitter at Nicky Bandini and at Mina Rizuki, and follow Serie A Chronicles on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Ciao for now.
Chronicles is a Chronicles production.